What's up, guys? My name's Jonathan, this is my swivel gun, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Cannoneer. Now, y'all really enjoyed the video that we put out when we showed you guys how we built our big cannon, but y'all had all kinds of questions about the build process and details and things that I just wasn't able to show you in that video since the cannon was already completed. Well, we had some more barrel material lying around, and I figured I'd bring you guys along and show you guys how we built the big cannon, but just on a slightly smaller scale using our swivel gun here. So I am going to let you guys know that I am going to be leaving out a couple of key details about the build process here, some of the materials and things, just to keep this a little more YouTube friendly. So if you're curious about some of the materials and things, be sure to check out the previous video about how we built the big cannon, and that'll maybe answer some of your other questions. I'm also going to let you guys know this is going to be a two-part video. Part one, we're going to show you guys how we mostly complete the barrel and all that process, and then part two is going to be finishing that up, making it look a lot nicer, as well as how we proof the cannon and the first shot. So our proof and our swivel gun, here's the same process with our big cannon. So if you guys are interested on that, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below and keep up with part two if you haven't done so already. And if you're interested in maybe sending us something to test out with our big cannon or our swivel gun here, I'll give you guys a little more details on that, some projectiles of your own design. All the information for the subscriber shot special will be down in the description below. And last but not least, before we head on over to the shop, I'd like to take just a second to thank the sponsor of today's video, Aura.
Have you ever stopped and counted how many spam text calls and emails that you get in a single day? Or have you ever been waiting for an important phone call and then get a bunch of phone calls that come through from unknown numbers that you just have to answer just because they might be the right one that you're waiting for, and then they all turn out to be spam? Or my personal favorite, all of the texts that come through that say you have an important package out for delivery that make you question, do I really have a package out for delivery? So if you're like me and you get way too many of these spam phone calls and texts, it's because your personal information has probably been made available online for data brokers and other bad actors to do with what they wish. Information like your full legal name, birth dates, email addresses, home addresses, and all of the same information for your relatives can be easily found online for sale through data brokers. And that's where the sponsor of today's video, Aura, comes into play. That's because Aura constantly monitors places like the dark web, online data brokers, and all other public sources and forums for places where your information might have become available for people to take advantage of. They will alert you at the first sign of danger, and they also submit opt-out requests to online data brokers on your behalf to have your information removed from their databases. Not only does this help cut down on unwanted spam texts and emails, it can also help potentially protect you from online identity theft, as well as credit card and bank fraud. So if you value your privacy as much as I do, be sure to visit Aura.com using my link in the pinned comment as well as the description and get a 14-day free trial and let Aura start protecting your online identity today. And now, back to today's video.
So a little bit of history on swivel guns before we get too far into the build process. Swivel guns have been around since about the 13th or 14th century, and you would find them mounted on the decks of ships, as well as the walls of forts and similar things like that. And if you saw at the beginning of this video, they're mounted in a yoke that swivels around. You aim it by hand and point it in the direction that you'd like to fire. Now this is the raw barrel for our swivel gun here. It's already been plugged. This is one of the steps that I'm going to leave out from this video about how we plugged the barrel. So this is a piece of oil well drilling stem, and you can see the barrel plug there as well as how thick the walls of the pipe are that's going to contain the pressure. You can also see our plug as well as the pin that's going to hold everything together inside of the finished swivel gun. So this is going to be the first barrel sleeve or first reinforcement. Now this is the same type of pipe, and you can see we've already gone ahead and marked off where our touch hole is going to be drilled. So we're going to cut out this hole using an acetylene torch. And I'll explain a little bit later as to why we cut this hole instead of just drill through the finished reinforcements at the end of the build process. And once we finish cutting this hole, we're going to clean up the edges and move on from there. Now, if you guys recall, we ultimately fill the cannon voids with lead. So what we've already gone ahead and done is we've centered the barrel into the first reinforcement, and we're just going to tack weld it here so then we can go ahead and weld around the touch hole, so that'll keep all of the lead inside and we don't have to worry about molten lead pouring out. So now what we're going to do is we're going to weld all the way around that hole that we cut out for the touch hole and weld the first reinforcement to the actual barrel itself.
We're going to make sure that there's no gaps and make sure that it's all filled with weld, so that way no lead will pour out of that hole when we fill up the gaps in the pipe. So now that the hole's been welded up, we can go ahead and start filling the voids with molten lead. So our lead's nice and hot in our ladle, and we're just going to go around nice and slowly and fill up all the voids and cavities and pour it in between that little gap there. And once the lead starts to come out of the top of the gaps like that, you know you filled the void up. So make sure that all of the voids are filled all the way around, equally around the barrel is filled nicely with lead, and you know you're good to go, and none will come out of the touch hole if you sealed it up properly as well. And now that the first reinforcement has been attached to the barrel, it's time to cut the touch hole for the second reinforcement. And after we cut it, we're going to have to fill this little gap. We're going to weld it up right there so no lead will come out when we fill the void in the second reinforcement. And we're back to the acetylene torch to cut out the touch hole for the second reinforcement. This is ultimately going to line up with the touch hole that we cut out in the first reinforcement. And once it's finished, we're going to clean it up, and then we can go ahead and slide it over the first reinforcement onto the barrel. And here's what that looks like with everything in line. Now we're going to go ahead and tack weld it in place so it won't move when we fill it with lead, and then we're going to fill up that gap in the end pipe. And that's what the end looks like all sealed up, so now we can go ahead and fill that gap with lead. So we already went ahead and welded completely around the touch hole that we cut as well in the second reinforcement. So now we're going to go ahead and fill that gap up with lead because we don't have to worry about it pouring out of that touch hole. So you can see we've got a lot of lead pouring out there. There's not a very big gap. We're going to go ahead and clean up all of that lead here in just a second. And then we're going to weld all of the reinforcements together and clean all of that up as well. And here's the barrel now that all of the welds have been And here's the barrel now that all of the reinforcements have been cleaned up, all of the lead's cleaned up and everything. And now we're just going to clean up the entire cannon and add some decorative features. So here's the barrel cleaned up and sanded, and now it's time to add some decorative barrel bands around where the reinforcements come together. Now these are just decorative barrel bands, and they're made out of mild steel, and they don't serve any structural integrity. We're just going to forge them out using the blacksmith shop. And you can see our round stock's nice and hot there. And we're just going to go ahead and start the curl for the barrel band. And once this is the right size, we're going to cut it off, and then we're going to attach it to the barrel. So we're going to make sure that the barrel band fits by comparing it to the actual cannon barrel. And then we're going to cut it off when it's finished and make a couple of these in different size mild steels for the different size barrel bands and go ahead and add them to the cannon barrel. And here's our first barrel band completed. We're going to make a couple more in some different size steels to make it look a little more fancy, and then once those are all done and completed, we'll weld them in place to the barrel. Here's one of the middle bands, and you can already see we've added a few more in the back, and then we've got to make one to go on the front as well, right there on the end. And that's one of the decorative bands on the end of the barrel getting measured out there. And this is our almost completed barrel. Now we've got to clean it up and attach the end cap to hold everything together. So before we add the end cap, we're going to make sure that everything's sealed up nice and solid, and we're going to go ahead and weld up all of the gaps and make a nice flat surface. And here's the end of the barrel with everything sealed up and nice and clean, ready to add the end cap to. So our barrel cover is a piece of pipe cap that's filled completely with lead. We're going to line it up around the barrel nice and straight, and then we're going to weld it on to hold everything together. And this seems like a perfect time to end part 1. I'll meet you guys back for part 2, where we'll add the trunnions, drill the touch hole, and proof our new swivel gun.
Well guys, that was a fun one, and I really hope you enjoyed part 1 of our swivel gun build video here. And if you did, go ahead and hit that like button. It's really going to help us get this video out into the world of YouTube. And if you have any questions about the build process while you're down there, go ahead and let me know in the comments, and I'll be happy to answer those for you as well. So once again, guys, thanks for hanging out here till the end. My name's Jonathan. This is my swivel gun, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode of The Cannoneer.